Hi, my name's Isabella Ferguson, and I am the host of this podcast, De-Stress for Success. Just a small announcement to kick us off. You may not know that I'm a counsellor, and amongst other things, I help people to drink less alcohol. If you are, a little sick of being caught on that hamster wheel of drinking a few too many wines the night before, having a disrupted sleep, waking up feeling exhausted, fatigued, and you'd like to take a break from alcohol for a little period, then why not consider joining my July 30-day small group alcohol freedom challenge? This group is amazing. We meet up twice a week via Zoom. We have daily video content in a private Facebook group. And it is all designed to slowly shift your mindset around alcohol to support you to get that kickstart to drinking less. So have a look at the links. There's lots of information there about it. I've run multiple alcohol freedom challenges, and within the first 10 days, people are talking about feeling, more excited about life, less bloated. They're feeling like they're getting their mojo back. So you don't have to have hit rock bottom. You don't have to have a drinking problem. You might just be sick of being caught in that cycle. And, July is a really good month to reclaim your health, reset your drinking goals, and really start the second half of the year with a bounce in your step. Now, let's get on to this episode. Today, I get to talk to the amazing Nikki Langman. Nikki Langman is a badass. In fact, she's written a book, How to Be a Badass, Navigating Your Road to Self-Mastery. Now, before I start this episode, I just want to mention that we touch on addiction and really briefly talk about an eating disorder and non-suicidal self-injury. Now, if any of these topics are triggering to you, perhaps consider not listening on. However, if you are going to listen on, look, this conversation is incredibly inspiring and motivating. There's nothing that Nikki is afraid to talk about. She really discusses, I guess, what could be defined as her first half of her life, which was bloody hard. She talks about trauma and what led to an alcohol and meth addiction and other disorders. But gosh, she pulled through and she developed her badass framework, and we can all learn from this framework. You don't have to have lived experience. You could be looking for purpose, fulfillment, courage, bravery, direction, all the things. You're just going to learn so much from this chat. Cannot wait to get started. So I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the De-Stress for Success podcast. Did you know that we inherit our stress response from our parents or carers or generations before? But we can also train our brain to respond to stress differently. It's all about brain health. I'm Isabella Ferguson, and I'm here to deliver to you the most up-to-date evidence-based methodologies on how to find some calm. In my early 40s, I bowed out of a 20-year legal career. Decades of running on high anxiety and drinking alcohol to cope had taken its toll on my nervous system, and I was burnt out. Now, as a 48-year-old corporate speaker, counsellor, coach, I'll interview the experts, ask the questions you wish you had the time to ask, and I'll deliver some practical tips to you. I'm glad you tuned in. Now let's de-stress. Today, I am welcoming Nikki Langman, international speaker, author, thought leader on emotional intelligence. I just love that description, thought leader. Endurance runner, no less. And the author of a book that we are about to talk about, How to Be a Badass, Navigating Your Road to Self-Mastery. As a rebel at heart, Nikki, that title just draws me in. A huge welcome to you.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Now, Nikki, I always start with these two questions. How do you know when you're feeling stressed? What are your go-to ways of just seeking to regulate and to de-stress?
My sleep gets very disturbed.
Mm.
My attitude changes. I often don't eat. I'll just forget to eat or to practice some kind of self-care. Not noticing, not doing body scans, not recognizing the tension or reaching for the Panadol instead of trying to understand why the headache is happening. Which is usually because my shoulders are up around my ears but I've always struggled with anxiety. So learning how to de-stress and how to practice self-care and self-love has been a lifelong journey, really.
Yeah.
And I think one that I'll be practicing and learning for the rest of my life. When alcohol was my coping mechanism for stress many, many years. And
I hear you.
yeah, I think a few people are going, yeah, I relate. But when I got sober in 2017, I realized that I was an emotional intelligence professional. So I was going into corporations and talking to people, executives, leaders, about how to manage their stress and corporate well-being and things. But then I was going home and I was yelling at my child, yelling at my husband, slamming doors. I couldn't control the anger because I had lost the outlet, the only real outlet that I knew. And that's where my athletic career, if you could call it that, in brackets, began, because I needed something, being so high energy, ADHD, and in recovery. I needed to manage all that excess stress. And so that's a story in itself. That could be a totally different podcast.
Yes. We should.
How I got into endurance
running
at 40. But what I love about that is I get to talk to women who have limiting beliefs and who are, let's say between 35 to 50 and say, I'm too old to take up any sports. I'm like, well, I took up karate and endurance running at 40.
Oh, I love it.
Let's talk about limiting beliefs.
Yes.
Those are the conversations I like to have. If I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
Now I find that if I don't have that exercise, it's become such a part of who I am. And that could be yoga. It could be a form of meditation. And I say a form of because it could be quiet meditation or running meditation. Just going into myself and being present with myself in whatever form that takes. Those are the things that if I don't have those in my daily routine, I will feel the stress.
Yeah.
And I'm not a very nice person.
Yeah.
So I'm told.
Yeah. I don't believe that for a second. Running meditation, I'm really just curious about, just briefly, because my earphones are broken. I normally have this sort of anxiety if I can't head out for a run without my headphones and a podcast, but I've had to recently. And I think I've come back and felt a whole lot more at peace and like it was a whole lot more enjoyable. What's running meditation to you?
Well, like I said a minute ago, I have ADHD. So I've always found the idea of sitting quietly and still to be extremely difficult, to the point where I just almost gave up, thinking this is just not for me. I read a wonderful book for those that are curious about meditation is the 10% Happier.
Yeah.
The
goodie.
What's his name? He was an anchorman in the US.
I'll put that. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes. It's a book about meditation for skeptics. And I was definitely a skeptic because I thought I just cannot sit. And the idea of sitting on a pillow for half an hour, no, not going to do it. So I found that I could use the energy. But like you said, when you don't have the distraction of the headphones or the podcast, and you just go inside yourself and you can hear your breath and you can hear your footsteps, to me, that is just as much meditation
Yeah.
as it is sitting and being quiet for half an hour
Yeah.
or 5 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever you can do,
Yeah.
because you're present. And to me, that's what mindfulness and meditation is
Yeah.
presence.
And it's certainly restorative. You had your moment to restore.
Mm, yeah.
Nikki, you just have fit in so much into your life before the age of 30, starting at 7 years old with alcohol, moving into meth addiction, non-suicidal self-injury or cutting,
Mm.
eating disorders. Look, when I read your beautiful story, I just wanted to reach out and hug that younger version of you. Looking back now, how do you feel about that young child, teen, and woman?
For a long time, I didn't allow myself to identify with trauma.
Mm,
Um, and it was actually through some of Gabor Mate's writings and Johann Hari
yeah.
that really brought me to realize that trauma can be defined in many different ways. And it took many years and a lot of money in therapy to be able to describe my childhood in one word: lonely. And
Hmm.
that is a form of trauma,
Yeah.
because it's that, the loneliness as a child, the feeling of nobody really cares, they're too preoccupied with themselves. And so it led me to, seek people who accepted me. And those people weren't necessarily the best people to associate with.
Yeah.
But I was so lonely and social anxiety as well, and just didn't, very intellectual, but didn't really have the social skills. And so I think I perpetuated my own loneliness. But it wasn't until I was probably in my mid 30s to late 30s that I started learning about the different kinds of trauma, and that it's not always what we think it is. Just like addiction isn't always what we think it is.
Mm,
Um, we imagine, if you're not familiar with addiction, you have a preconceived idea, a stigmatized idea of what it is and
yeah.
what it looks like, and the person on the street, the homeless guy with the paper bag. But you know what? It's your doctor, it's your teacher, it's your
Huh.
sister, it's your husband, it's your child,
Yeah.
because it can affect anyone, and so can trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you sort of learnt about it and you learnt about trauma and loneliness, and it's interesting you touched on Johann Hari, which of course he did that beautiful, amazing TED talk about how connection, quality connection, not quantity, is almost the opposite to addiction.
Mhm.
What learnings did you take from all of that as you reflected back on the everything that you went through?
It was so eye-opening because I self-stigmatized for so long. You
Yeah.
know, like many people who are in active addiction or have had lived experience, self-forgiveness is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think we stay in a state of unwellness. And because we have these limiting beliefs that we've done so much wrong in our lives, that we don't deserve happiness, we don't deserve love, we don't deserve connection, we
Mm.
don't deserve friends. And Johann Hari, that TED talk, everything we think we know about addiction is wrong. Oh
Yeah.
my God, very eye-opening.
Yeah, I got goosebumps when I listened to it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you want to go farther, the book is also excellent. But Gabor Mate as well, a great one to put in the show notes is The Realm of Hungry Ghosts.
Yes, got it over here in my bookshelf.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And another one of my favorites too that has really opened my eyes is The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah. Yep. Got those too.
Oh my gosh, we should share bookshelves.
I know. I know. Well, this book here, which I have just tagged, is also now going to be placed firmly in my bookshelf because it is just, it's motivational, it's inspiring, it gets into some of those juicy subjects that I love, which we will talk about in a second. But if you don't mind me just reading just a quote here, which I think was the turning point, the turning
Mm.
point. And I got a bit teary because, it was reflective of things that I had been through as well with my husband. I heard the front door open and my spine stiffened as my husband's footsteps came closer to the bedroom door. He paused in the doorway for a while. I didn't look at him. I couldn't stand to see the look of distress on his face. There was nothing I could say. Eventually, he came over to the bed, sat down next to me. I tried to hide my quivering hands, but I couldn't. He felt the heat and the perspiration radiating off my body as I fixed my eyes to the wall and focused on trying to regulate my breathing. He sighed softly. I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. I nodded. One of these days, I'm going to come home and find you dead, but I'll know you didn't mean to do it. You just got it wrong. Oh, how did those words land? Did they propel you forward?
Well, I know you're not going to read the next sentence, but that's how they landed.
Yes,
You'll have to get the book to read the next sentence, I
yes,
think,
yes, that's it. That's
because
right.
it pretty much sums it up. But that was a turning point, and it was almost like I describe it as like the sliding glass door opened, and this just gust of cold air came in, and every hair on my body just and I was sitting there staring at a wall, like almost catatonic. And all of a sudden, I was filled with this just intense energy of, oh my God. And because my first thought was, well, thank God, I wouldn't want anyone to think that I was suicidal.
Yeah,
And, luckily, I've never been suicidal, but accidental overdose leaves a lot of questions. And he
yeah,
was basically saying, you're going to die, but I'll know that it was accidental.
yeah,
And my first thought was relief. And then my second thought was, no, in so many words, no, 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 no. This is not how my story ends.
yeah.
And so he took me to the ER that night. I went immediately into treatment, and that was in 2017. And
Oh,
a lot has life is just so different now.
yeah. I had a similar trip up to the ER, driven by my husband as well. There's something about that, the compassion that he showed and the gentleness. There was no anger, there was no hostility or judgment, and that can just be so motivating in itself, can't it? Nikki, I love the Badass framework. I know and have read that you wrote this framework really to navigate through your own challenges. It's an acronym. What does it stand for?
Well, I'll give you a little context as to how
Mm.
it became an acronym. Was as a professional speaker, I was using bits of my story on stage, and badass to me has always been a very motivating and empowering word. And
Same. I love it.
yeah, yeah. When you're a badass, you know you're a badass. Um, but I found that mm, I was speaking to lots of different audiences and lots of different demographics, and the message of using it just as an adjective or an empowering word wasn't landing with everyone. Some people loved it, but a lot of people didn't like it at all, and some people found it downright offensive. And what I really wanted to do was not write a book about addiction. I wanted to write a book about overcoming adversity,
Yeah.
because everyone has gone through adversity, and we don't know what it's going to look like or how long it's going to last. So I wanted to tell my story and say, look, this is my adversity, and this is a lifelong thing that I'm going to live with for the rest of my life. But I didn't want people to not read it because they thought it was a bad word
Yeah.
or that it was about addiction only. So I thought, well, how can I make this about empowering people to overcome their own limitations, their own limiting beliefs, their own traumas, and be a badass every day. So it was just divine intervention that the letters just kind of fell into the right order to actually say what I wanted to say. I think it was really a God thing. But it stands for brave, authentic, direction, as in like direction and purpose, action, self-love, and self-talk.
Yeah.
It's the acronym. And, you know, I've always said that I can't be my best self every day. And I hate that phrase. You know, be your best self. Let's just strive to be our best selves. Show up to work as your best self. Well, I'm sorry, but guess what? If you're human, you're not your best self every day. But you can be a badass every day because you can show up with bravery. And sometimes bravery means just getting out of bed and having a shower. You can be authentic with everyone you meet. We don't have to wear masks. A lot of people struggle with purpose and direction. They feel like they should know. But, you know, as I talk about it, it's fluid. If you don't know what your direction or your purpose is, don't worry about it because it's going to change. But keep your eye on that North Star.
Yeah.
And if you don't take action, well, none of what I just said is actually going to do anything. And then, of course, we know the importance of self-love and positive self-talk. So it just, like I said, it was just kind of divine intervention that I was able to put it into a framework and an acronym that said exactly what I wanted to say without it being misinterpreted.
Yeah. It's just interesting that you touched on authenticity and direction, finding your North Star. I naturally always gravitate towards research and books that are going to provide a bit of guidance there because it's always something that my clients want to know about. Who am I? And it's self-worth. I need fulfillment and purpose. And it's often what's, you know, when you're poking your head up at that sort of 40, 50-year-old stage, your kids are older, or you're sort of leaning through menopause past and into that second stage, it's something shifted and you want more. I just love the way that you're guiding people through, working out what your values are, working on your dark side, your shadow. Wow. I mean, that's powerful stuff. That's powerful.
Yes. If you really want to confront yourself and get to know yourself on the deepest, darkest, most medieval level, do shadow work.
Oh, would you mind telling us a bit more about what shadow work is?
Yeah. So it's Jung. It's kind of, if you think of the yin and the yang. So the yin is our light side. It's the side of ourselves that we project to the world because it's the side of ourselves that we like. So the things that we like about ourselves. So I'm funny, you know, I'm personable, I can be charismatic. So I'm going to showcase those things because I'm going to think to myself, if that's all you know about me, then you're going to like me. But our shadow side is the other. It's the dark. It's the things that we reject about ourselves that we don't want anyone to know. It's our secrets, our skeletons. And what we often do is what we reject in ourselves, we project onto other people.
Yes. Yes.
So, you know, let's say, you know, going back to struggling with anger in the past, I would be very critical and judgmental of other people who had anger outbursts because I was, oh, for God's sake, control yourself. You're in public, you know. And but what it was me rejecting something I didn't like about myself and projecting it onto somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's what's his name? Oh, geez, I'm having a mind blank. You know, I'm going to let you know so you can put it in the show notes. He does an online self-paced program for shadow work, and it's probably the best self-paced program that I've seen because he's very, very into. I mean, he has studied Jung, and it's phenomenal. And he has a program that's very inexpensive, but it guides you through. Scott, hold on. I've got to do this. Because
Yeah. Search that up and I can do a bit of an edit here.
Scott. Uh, Scott. Yeah, you're gonna edit this part out, yeah?
Yeah.
Scott. Is this right?
Something that I could do myself just to learn how to delve into it with my counseling a bit more.
Yeah. Mental, I think this is it. Um, I just want to be 100% sure.
Yeah.
Self-leadership, self-awareness, how to cultivate self-leadership, reducing anxiety. Um, yes, Scott Jeffrey.
Scott
Is it
Jeffrey.
Scott Jeffrey? So yeah, he is. Google him, and he does a lot of work around self-discovery, and I think it's probably been the single greatest thing that I have done for my own self-awareness,
Yeah.
to really get to know who I am. And you know, when we were talking about authenticity, the biggest challenge that I think we have with authenticity is that society tells us who we should be. Social media
Mm.
tells us what we should look like. Our family, or you know, our nature, or nurture, or our culture, or our workplace tell us how we should behave and what ladder to climb and what success looks like. And in the process, we lose ourselves. And this starts in childhood. So you know, if I could ask you a question, did you name yourself?
No,
Who named you?
my parents.
So you were given a label at birth, and you've been carrying that label that somebody else gave you your entire life. And have you ever questioned it?
No, I've liked the name Isabella. I've felt that was me.
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful name. It is. But
Yeah.
we're all kind of in that same boat. You know,
Yeah.
we're labeled from birth, and then we go through school and we go through testing, and we're told what we're good at and what we're not good at. And these become ingrained beliefs that we have about ourselves. So we get to, yeah, middle aged, and we go, I don't know who I am. Why? Because you've never been given the opportunity.
And I have to say, there was something in your book that I really resonated with is that you can lose that sense of purpose or who you are if you've just gone through life ticking the check boxes. So
Mhm.
you go to uni, you get your uni degree, you then get a job, you get married, the kids, you're doing all the societal things that you're meant to do, but you haven't really looked at, well, what are my values? What do I actually love? What are my passions? Am I living in alignment with them? And you can
Mm.
sort of become unstuck, can't you? There's that kind of friction between the lack of knowing who you are, living that kind of dual life. Alcohol addictions, they can kind of form a salve to numb out that discord, but
Mhm.
eventually you're going to have to work it out. Well, how would you answer the question of a person that would say, how do I work out who I am? Who am I? What's my, that question is a hard one to give guidance to, but your book goes there, which I love.
Mm, yeah, and I really wanted to go deep on that. And I think every one of those chapters. So the first half of the book, as you know, is my personal story, and it's dark in the beginning, just to give that context. But then it gets better and better and better as I talk about recovery and getting into athletics and learning how to manage anger and all that whatnot.
Yeah.
Then the second half, each chapter is dedicated to one of those letters. But I really wanted each of those letters to intertwine with each other and follow on. Um, and to help people to answer those questions.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm in the process of making a workbook to go with that second half.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so that it's not the story itself, it's just the framework and guiding questions on, discovering your core values, asking yourself about the influencers that you had in your early life, How do you identify? Do you identify with who you are, what you have, or do you identify with who you're not and what you don't have?
Oh, that's a sharp question, isn't it? That's a good.
It is. It is. It is. And and people get really hung up on purpose and direction. And I
Yeah.
think all those things really add to our stress levels, because when we start thinking about those things over and over, my God, I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. How I identify bravery. A lot of people think, well, I'm not a very brave person, because they think of these male archetypes, parachuting into enemy territory. But, I talk about emotional bravery,
Yeah.
social bravery, financial bravery, spiritual bravery. And when
Yes.
you put it down like that, it actually empowers people to go, wow, I'm a lot braver than I think I am.
Yeah.
And, okay, let's look at my values. So stay tuned for the workbook, because it will guide even more in depth to help people with those questions.
Oh, yeah. When you do that, send the link to purchase that, and I'll go back in and edit and plonk it in this episode. You have definitely demonstrated bravery throughout your whole life. The experience that you went through, you've managed to turn around into something to grow from, learn from, and help others. What qualities do you think you have learned and gained from everything you've been through that you now bring into your present work? What are the qualities and skills that your early life set you up for to do the work that you do now?
I don't believe in strengths and weaknesses.
Aha.
I actually think that we have tendencies,
Yeah.
and the tendencies, and this is something I'll credit my mentor, Michael Grinder, with, because he taught me this. He said, we have tendencies and we have behaviors, and they can be productive or they can be unproductive. So I have always been tenacious, motivated, a little bit recalcitrant,
Aren't we all?
and persevere. And I've always had a lot of grit.
Yeah.
So when I was drinking and using, it was those qualities that I was using in an unproductive way that had me drinking a lot more than other people. That
Yeah.
got me into a lot of trouble. But now they're the exact same qualities that get me to the finish line of a marathon.
Yes. Oh,
There's
goosebumps.
no difference.
Mm.
It's just the way we choose to use our strengths,
Yeah.
and how we recognize our values. And when, I talk about the wet bathing suit feeling, about when we're not in alignment with our values, it's kind of like you get that achy feeling like you're wearing somebody else's wet bathing suit.
Yes. Oh, such good imagery.
Yeah, yeah. And so I've started to recognize that I have these tendencies, and they can be productive or unproductive. And I really have to be self-aware every day. And I
Yeah.
have to be badass every day. I have to stay on top of it, because I can easily go back into unproductive. I know how to manipulate. I know how to deceit. I know how to lie. I'm very good at those things.
Yeah.
But I'm also very good at coaching people in their values, and being altruistic, and, being, an excellent friend and a mother and a wife.
Yeah.
It's just how I'm choosing to use that. And so that's kind of like my trigger. If I'm out of alignment with how I'm using those tendencies, I feel that icky feeling. And
Yes.
now I need to circle back and go, okay, why am I not in alignment with my values at the moment?
Yeah. I really like the way you've spoken about that, and sort of has echoes there of just your awareness around what came out of shadow work, knowing what your negative tendencies are. But I love how you spoke about we've got a choice. We've got a choice to lean into the positives or the negatives of our tendencies. Something that a lot of our listeners love to know about, particularly from people that have managed to sustain a sober lifestyle for quite a period of time. And when you're in a good phase, when it's all working well for you,
Mhm.
what's part of that daily practice that you know works? And I sort of referring to that, people talk about needing something in that routine. It's not just, the toolkit kind of things. It's actually a practice
Mm,
that can
mm.
sustain you for the long term. What's yours?
When I'm at my best and my healthiest,
Yeah.
I start my day running because that is my time to go into myself, and that's my meditative time.
Yeah.
Um, I do run my own business, so I do work from home, and that can get me into a high stress or high anxiety state
Oh,
if I'm alone and behind screens too long. So again, having the self-awareness of maybe scheduling lunch with a friend.
yeah.
I practice karate, so I usually practice at night, but there are daytime classes, so lunchtime classes. And if I'm feeling particularly wound up about something, then I have the dojo just right down the street, and so that fills the connection for
Yeah.
me. So it's that balance of introspection and meditation, where it's just me. Especially, I love when it's crisp and cold in the morning, 10 to 12 degrees, and
You'll
you're
get that
just,
in Melbourne.
yeah, it's the only thing I like about winter, being from LA.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, but I start my day inside me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people start their day with a meditative practice. That's just the way I do it.
Yeah.
And then I do some work, and then I kind of just do that self-check and those body scans throughout the day. And if I need to get out, I get out.
Yeah.
Even just going for a walk can reset. But it's learning what your particular triggers are. And when I was writing my book, it was during one of the lockdowns, and I was behind screens for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Ouch.
I was a basket case.
Yeah.
But I was also a basket case because I was going back into the dark corners of my mind of things that I didn't want to remember.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
It's a
yeah,
hard time for many people, wasn't it? A really hard time.
yeah, yeah. When I'm not at my best, though, I'll flip that, is when I get out of that routine.
Yeah.
Is when and the people closest to me, my best friends, my sisters, my husband, if I am too quiet, they know I'm not okay. So
Aha.
connection is critical.
Yeah.
If I start skipping runs, if I start skipping karate classes,
Warning.
um,
Mm.
yeah, warning signs. And
Yeah.
then that's what leads to not seeing the potholes in the road.
Yep.
Um, but being a fighter, and I've been doing karate for 8 years now, so I kind of use that as a metaphor for life. That I've learned how to. I get hit, I get kicked, I get knocked down, but I get back up every time, and I punch back, I kick back, and no matter how frustrated I am, I still show up. And so there's been times where I have had small lapses in my recovery, but I kind of say it's like recovery is not a smoothly paved road.
Mm-mm.
It is filled with bumps and potholes, and you have to have your wits about you, because sometimes if you're not paying attention, you might hit one of those potholes and blow a
Yeah.
tire.
Oh,
But then you have a choice. You have a choice to pull over immediately and fix the tire, or you can keep going and ruin the wheel, the axle, and write the car off.
yeah.
It's up to
Beautifully
you.
said. So beautifully said. Particularly love how you touched on uh, that sense of not connecting, going silent, withdrawing, not getting away from the screen. They're all, particularly if you have those ADHD tendencies, you can really squirrel down into a topic or something on the screen, but it's at your detriment potentially with connection and getting out and about.
Mm.
Yeah, that was a lovely reflection. Thank you. I know they'll be really valuable for many people.
Look, before I ask you where people can find you, is there anything else you'd like to add, just to say to our listeners about your story, about what you do? Any words of wisdom as some parting comments?
I think for anybody that's listening to this, whatever adversity you've been through or you're going through right now, never ever give up on yourself. And I say, like in the conclusion of my book, it only takes one match to spark an explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of us, myself included, often don't give ourselves enough credit for how powerful we really are. And, we are much more powerful than we give ourselves credit for, especially if we've had a lot of limiting beliefs and negative messages that have been ingrained in our psyche, or the way we talk to ourselves if we're not in a habit of positive self-talk. Stress is something that sneaks up on you, and you often don't notice how stressed you are until you have been beaten down so low. And so I would say, find a tribe, find people who will support you unconditionally, and let them know what your triggers are.
Yeah.
I have to tell people, if you don't hear from me for 3 days, call me.
Oh.
I may not be okay.
Yeah. Well, that's vulnerability, that's friendship, that's life. That's what we're all here to do and to support one another. Nikki Langman, you are a badass. You're certainly a badass that I'd like to have in my corner. I just loved your book, love meeting you, learning more about your story. Where can our listeners find you if they want to just learn about you, purchase this book, engage your services?
Absolutely. My website, nikkilangman.com. And if you're interested in buying the book, I will I'll give you a discount code for your listeners.
Oh, yes.
That you can put in the show notes exclusively for your listeners. Because even at the listed price that I have it on my website, it's still cheaper than Amazon.
Haha.
So
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'll sweeten the pot. I'll sweeten the deal because because I think anyone can get something out of it, even if your story has nothing to do with lived experience of addiction.
Oh, yes.
So nikkilangman.com or LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And
wonderful.
Nikki Langman.
Thank you. I'm going to put all of that in the show notes, so all those links will be easy to find. Thank you. What a lovely chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been wonderful. I wish we could talk for another hour.
I know, so do I. We'll have to have you back on. Thanks, Nikki.
All right, Isabella. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to rate, subscribe, or leave a review about this podcast. These 3 things really help to get this podcast out to people that might need to hear it. You can find me at www.isabellaferguson.com.au. Jump on my website, check out all the resources I've got there about alcohol, stress, and burnout. You can also book in a free introductory call. It's a 30-minute confidential chat if you are looking for a counsellor or a coach to support you to drink less or to manage your stress. I'm always here to chat. If you've got a question, please do not hesitate to reach out. I hope you have a really good day. See you later.